to start my day here in Colorado by interviewing somebody with your background and with your, I mean, you know, I know you're a VC and we'll get into the whole biographical information, but you are also a kick-ass writer. I read your story on the Zoom economy. Yeah, it was really like, I mean, there were some words that I had to look up in the dictionary, but it was so illuminating and so relevant. We'll get to that. But first of all, let's talk about you. Let's talk about you and Mayfield and what it's like right now to be a VC working with early stage startups. Like, what's your perspective? And then we're going to get into the advice part. I know.
Wow. Where do you even start? 2020, what a year. There's a funny meme going around where people are sorry for the kids of the future having to remember everything that happened in the year 2020 in the future history class. Just so many things have happened. When we started this year, many of us were so hopeful that this was going to be a year of change and progress. I think
Right.
the one tagline I'd heard was this will be the soaring 20s, and now it's turned into the zooming 20s. But something we're wrestling with now is all the midst of change. We have a lot of societal unrest. We've got probably 200 with tensions that are bubbling up around the country. We've got a global pandemic that's probably here to stay and will keep mutating, and there probably won't be a 100% effective vaccine. This could be our new normal. So there's so much change. People have been fearful. First 2-3 months of pandemic was spent coaching our portfolio companies. Don't expect outside funding to be available. Make your current cash stretch. Cut your burn rate by 30 to 50%. Expect no growth this year. So these are pretty gloom and doom situations, and fortunately just closed a fund before it all hit. But the thought is to be frugal, to don't expect things to have a V-shaped quick bounce back. Maybe it's more like a U or a W with multiple ripples, depending on the pandemic. And now we're going to have climate effects kicking in, probably wildfires, etc. But the silver lining is that, boy, if necessity is the mother of invention, we have a whole lot of new innovation that's being birthed and will be birthed. There's so many needs now. For me as a VC, there's this recognition that we have tremendous responsibility as stewards because, in many ways, we are gatekeepers of capital. We are agents of this capitalist system, which produces wonderful, entrepreneurial outcomes. But when you see what's happening on the streets, this form of capitalism we have probably embodies a whole lot of systemic injustice, inequality, racism, trauma that's affected a lot of people. How do we act as agents for business as better, not just rush back to business as usual? So this has put a whole new lens, I know, for my team and certainly for me, on what we invest in, and the greater question, why, as well as, is this good for society? I asked that question before. How big will this make it viral? Unicorn headlines? Is it going to be a big thing for kids?
Right.
Now there's a deeper question of, should this even exist?
Right. And how do you, as a well-known leader and an inspirational leader, how do you lead through, the gloom and doom that we're talking about right now? And it's real, and it's hard to keep people inspired going through what we're going through, not only in the United States, but all over the world.
For that, leading by example, as a board member, trying to embody the values and asking the hard questions of the why, but also really looking internally, like, stand for? What matters to me? What form will I serve? Given there's so many problems and challenges to address now, in a way that's been a blessing because without a clear why, we're just usually investing in the next cool thing, or
Right.
it seems kind of novel, or honestly, you're solving like problems for the one percenters. But now when you have the entire planet's climate to solve, the future of food, the future of work, biosecurity, security, all these things to work on, it gives you a really sharp lens of a deeper why and the purpose of the companies and the founders and their missions that they're working on to make the world a safer, better place. You've got the United Nations SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, you give me a support of. Like, not to put it, too subtly, but we have an existential challenge across the planet. That's not worth solving. Then, just delivering dog faster to rich people doesn't make any sense
Right.
in that context.
I mean, I think one of the things that also stood out when I was reading, on the Mayfield website and some of the work that you've done, like one of the things that you have focused on, and I think this is important for startups to understand, is the storytelling part of being
Yeah.
a startup and how important that is to VCs and other investors and, to get funding. Can you talk to me about what that means and how you approach that with your startups?
Yeah. When I first got into venture capital, I thought it was about deep due diligence of new technologies, getting in the weeds about patents and all these sorts of things and financial model engineering, but it wasn't. It was much more about really, in some ways, armchair psychology, understanding the who, the why, the what of each of the people. Even, what is their core, what is the thing that they're trying to heal or compensate the business they're building, right? Then with that, I think there's been a lot of exploration of what are the business models that we use, how do those kind of apply, and what potential damage or consequences can come from those business models. What I mean by that is, we battle a lot of digital addiction today. Uh, have It's known almost as cognitive strip mining, when you have these big platforms like Facebook and whatnot trying to just mine all our attention and our data. But I don't think these companies set out to be malicious per se. We're just operating a certain business model, and free plus ad-based business model really requires that you addict your users over time to push ads to them, right? So a lot of this back to first principles thinking is, what are the potential consequences of the business models we choose, and how to benefit, um, certain people or disadvantage other people. It's
Yeah.
really thinking about, in a weird way, how healthy is this business model for society? Not just my customers, not just my shareholders, but for people are. That's been a pretty interesting theme to examine. Looks like the volume's
Yeah.
not quite as loud, so
I mean,
I'll
I
stop
kind of
talking.
have this philosophy, and as a journalist, and I think that the storytelling part, your story is your greatest asset, right? You need to know your numbers, you need to know the revenue, but you have to know your story and your aha moment, because you are your story, and you are what is going to land you funding or media, as the case may be. But I just found that really interesting because a lot of VCs they don't lead with storytelling, and at Mayfield it just feels like a little bit more like your philosophy as a VC is not quite so traditionally edgy like most Silicon Valley VCs, and so I mean we've kind of talked about the philosophy behind
Hmm.
your work and Mayfield, and maybe talk about what,
Yep.
when you are, when people are pitching, what are you looking
Yep.
for in a startup? Are you looking
Yep.
at the founder? What,
Yep.
what, what are you looking for?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. When you asked about story, I was talking about like, business model is one representation of that. That's like the story of how the company will grow, but the deeper story, the people, we have a tagline at
Yeah.
Mayfield, which is people first. What that really means is understanding, like I mentioned, the psychology of the people behind it. Why are you building this? And I often like to say that if you want to understand why an institution or company does anything in any given moment, study its business model. If you want to understand why a person does anything in a given moment, study his or her core wound, or basically deepest inner trauma, and how they're responding to that, because almost everything is how we're compensating for that core wound. Culture of a company is an extension of the founder's energy, their values, their personal story, where they are in their hero's journey. So I'm a big fan of the hero's journey framework, which is the archetypical story pattern. But to your point, one of the X factors we look for in entrepreneurs: how well do they tell their story? Personal story, company story, team story, mission story. Everything in entrepreneurship is storytelling. You could have the greatest technology in the world, but if you're stuck just talking about the speeds and feeds, it doesn't emotionally connect with folks. That's why it's not always that the technologically superior product wins. It's often the story that resonates most. And something I like to look for is, does this company offer a product or service which is so emotionally resonant,
Hmm.
something people get passionate behind, that the customer will make it into their own story, if that makes sense? Through
Yeah.
this product or service, does that customer better tell their own personal story through that offering? One example is Whole Foods. I think our generation brought this in. You go to Whole Foods, there's not just one kind of honey, there's like 32 kinds of honey. Each one has a story.
Right.
This one is made by bees that are vegan
Right.
in Oregon that practice tantric yoga or something, right? And it's priced at 3 times more normal honey, but there's a story behind it. When you put that honey on your table, you're waiting for someone to ask you, what's the story with the tantric yoga honey? And then you have a whole story that you launch into because you co-opt that product into your own personal story. Every purchase is a personal branding moment, a personal storytelling moment. It's not just a product. This represents a piece of my story that I aspire to have. And do
Yeah, I mean,
founders
I think
understand that?
it is an art form, but the key to successful storytelling, I think, for entrepreneurs and early stage startups, is really the authenticity, right?
Yeah.
Like what you were saying, like a company and a culture will always take on the essence of its leader. I mean, that's just a known factor, and I think that getting to that point is really being true to your story and to yourself. Honestly, I mean, it's Man, I sound like an armchair psychologist. Sorry. I
No,
feel
that's true.
like
The
it's like,
greatest thing in a founder is deep, deep self-awareness. A lot of times the hardest thing sometimes is when a founder has something they're working on. It's kind of cool. But it's not core to their purpose or their
right,
mission or their passion. That purpose, that personal story matters so much because times will get rough for a startup. The only thing startups have in common is they almost always die at some point in their life. If you don't
right,
have that deep connection with that purpose, it's hard to have the perseverance or grit. And it's harder to sell that story to others, when you don't truly live it and believe it. And
right,
everything in life is sales. You're always selling your vision, you're selling for fundraising, you're selling for hiring, you're selling to sell products and services, you even sell to go IPO or sell your company. And
right,
so the more authentic that story is, I think, the easier it is to do that sale to the point where you're really mission driven and your story resonates. Employees would turn down Facebook or Google that would pay them 10 times more because they want to believe in the story that you're working on as it resonates with them.
when you're investing, are you and I agree with you completely. And I think another challenge for startups is having a clarity of vision. And
Yeah.
as a failed entrepreneur, a three-time failed entrepreneur, I know that it is so important to be able to state your vision in 3 sentences or less and feel it and understand it and believe it, right? Otherwise, you can get lost in all of the mission statements and the pro formas and all of that. But that clarity is going to help you with the storytelling. And
Yeah.
when you're working with founders, are there characteristics? I mean, are there certain kinds of founders you like to work with?
Yeah. I am a fan of founders with deep personal awareness, and in an ideal world, what they're building is core to who they are. Um, I'll be candid. In Silicon Valley, especially during the boom times, we had a lot of entrepreneurs, people wanting to be entrepreneurs because it's a cool thing. And they came in. I don't know that they were necessarily mission or passion driven. It was like, I need to do something to get into Y Combinator. What's a
Okay.
hot market? Oh, let's get into esports, or let's get into vaping or something. That'll be a big market. And so a lot of times it's driven by the outcome as opposed to, you know, this is core to who I am. I studied this passionately when I was a kid, or this affected me personally. I had an uncle who suffered from mental health, and I want to work on this because I want to do this for my uncle. That's the difference between I think being a purpose-driven entrepreneur versus just kind of an outcome driven, a unicorn hunting entrepreneur.
Right.
That can work too, but I find I prefer to work with those that are deeply mission driven. And about the thing on the vision and the values, the mission statement is something we gloss over a lot. It usually is honestly fortune cookie mumbo jumbo we slap on something to make it sound good. But here's a common mission statement: we are a high performance culture, of excellence and teamwork and data-driven decisions. Those are not values. Those are byproducts of deeper
Yeah.
values and mission. And what I mean by that is if you value deep transparency and trust between team members, that leads to more high performance culture. Do you know what I mean? High performance culture is not a value, that's an outcome. And so when you really do that work, it's very uncomfortable because with the founding team to dig in and look at what are our lineages, what biases do those come with,
Right.
what's our light and our shadow, what are our blind spots, how are we going to bring a team that addresses those? From there, then you paint a vision collectively that gets defined into actual values and principles that lead to structures and patterns and practices that lead to stuff like high performance. You know what I mean? So
Right.
a lot of times we get it backwards. We look at the outcome and call that the mission or the vision statement, but it usually is deeper than that. You have to really kind of start within. It's that saying, as within, so expressed without, you know.
Yeah, I had when I was working at Entrepreneur and working on a bunch of stories, I had a guy who came and pitched me. I mean, we got pitched all the time. Some of them were insane and some of them were good, but he pitched me, and this is how he led his pitch letter. I am a very deep and interesting person. You need to do a story on me. And I was like, deep and interesting people don't need to say that, like we'll go through discovery and figure that. But anyway, the other questions I have for you have to do with the international market for entrepreneurship, because there are all kinds of really cool little ecosystems popping up all over the world. And, the topic of entrepreneurship is fluent for you and I, right? Because we're in the United States, it's part of our character, it's who we are. But it's a very, very new topic in many places. And even in places like Croatia, if you tell your parents, if you're, a Gen Xer and you tell your parents, I'm an entrepreneur, what they hear is you're in the mafia, right? Like,
Oh,
it's,
wow.
yeah, like it's, if you're not working the way, culturally, for years, how people have worked off the dole of the government, largely,
Yeah.
you're considered kind of criminal and a little bit of a risk taker. So what is your advice or philosophy on, how to get the topic of entrepreneurship to really have, because it can change cultures, it can change the global economy. And how can we really, participate in this global effort to get the message out about how important this is?
Well, I think it'll start even from parenting down to children. I grew up, the son of immigrants who came in on the academic route. The only advice I was ever given is just get good grades. That's all that matters. Turns out that's not all that matters. If you really understand why, I get it. They came into this country, they were poor, they would just want to make sure their kids didn't starve. The route to that was get good grades, maybe you'll get a good job and you can pay your rent. That really doesn't necessarily help the world.
Right.
If you just get a job, to go to college, to get a job, to work for a big
Yeah.
company, I'm not sure that makes the most of your true gifts or serves the world, because we have so many problems to work on right now. I would go as so far as to say as I'm not sure college, the way we have it today, will matter when my 7-year-old is 18. And so I'm thinking, as a parent, my true job is to teach her entrepreneurship as a mindset, a value system, and a lifestyle from the start. I would rather teach her how to invest and build her own lifestyle business such that by the age of 20, she's able to manage that. And then maybe she could go to college specifically to learn what she's deeply passionate about, or
Right.
or pursue her greatest gifts in service to the world, as opposed to just got to get a steady job to pay rent. Right. And so we really need to ingrain that sense of entrepreneurship. Now, that what I'm not saying don't work for companies or get an education. The point is, if you know what it's in service to, for example, I have a personal vision that I want to work on sustainable food, plant-based protein, whatever it is. Therefore, working backwards, here's the companies I could work at. Here's the skill sets and knowledge I want to pick up to go do that someday and solve that. That's different than, mom says I gotta go to college. I gotta learn something. I don't know. I hear accountants make
Right.
okay money. I'll go into accounting. You know what I mean? So it's even entrepreneurship as a personal metaphor, the hero's journey, tied to what are my greatest gifts, what are my greatest passions, and sometimes what are my greatest pains and traumas. Because in the hero's journey, sometimes the thing that almost kills you turns out to be what helps you develop your superpower, your passion, and your gift back to the world. So I think that work really is important. Understand, there's that saying that we are passionate about that which we were most denied growing up.
Hmm. Yeah, it's true. It's true. And can we talk real quickly? First of all, the world is at such an inflection point right now, and entrepreneurship is, not top of mind for everyone. But do you think the world, and especially like Y Combinator, I interviewed Michael yesterday, like will it ever return to normal, or are we just going to be a culture of Zoomers?
We will have some return to in-person. We've just wired for that, but we'll have a new normal, and maybe it'll be a
Yeah.
hybrid. Here's the upside I like of this is we used to battle with work from home. Now I think it's normal and maybe healthy to work from anywhere. My
Right.
dream personally is that this will lead to a diaspora away from crowded, overpriced cities like San Francisco back to, I don't know, wine country or places in the countryside. You could have
Right.
co-living, co-working, intentional communities. We're doing your work over Zoom, going in for all hands off sites, but more in connection with nature. I haven't done more hiking or spent this much time in nature ever. I don't want to go back to normal. It's been
Right.
so beautiful to be able to be productive, but also connected with nature. And I think that's one of the fundamental disconnects of modern society is that we've gotten away from that natural lifestyle of being in community and being with nature. All the slick steel glass high rises and the click for anything, inconvenience culture. I think
Right.
COVID is teaching us to be return back to a more harmonious balance. So the question you asked is this just Zoom forever? Probably not, but what if we adopt some new practices here? Again, a new normal that's better, healthier for the planet, healthier for our lifestyles, and maybe it means more harmonious balance with nature, with ourselves, with each other, maybe work and life as well. I don't have you felt this? It's like COVID quarantine has given you a chance to just take a breath and slow down. There's a saying that Mother Nature has sent us all to our rooms to think about what we have done. We're being grounded. And so I don't miss airplanes. I don't miss conference centers. I think part of me would be happy if I never step into another conference hall ever again. And yet, I feel more connected with people around the world. I'm one click away from you. You're in Colorado. One click away from all these amazing people in Turkey. And so, in some sense, it feels more connected and intimate, especially because we're having conversations. We're speaking real time, with our voices and video, not just carefully crafted Instagram social posts that are meant for clicks and likes. There's more
No, I mean,
authenticity.
I totally agree. And I've worked remotely. I live on a ranch on top of a mountain in Colorado, and I'm in my studio right now. And I'm telling you, the quality of my work, the peace of mind I have, even just watching my daughter graduate over Zoom, so many more people got to participate, being with my kids, being with my horses and my motorcycles. Like, I just highly recommend the remote thing. It really does work, and your productivity goes up because you're trying to prove yourself, but your peace, comes much more in spades. I think. I mean, that's just my first person opinion. I highly recommend it. So,
I had some funny moments because your home life and your work life are balanced together. I've had my 7-year-old accidentally Zoom bomb talks like this. She'll just run up and be like, "Daddy!" And it's cute because that's normal now. And
it democratizes, like
yeah,
everybody gets the same.
it makes
It's
us more human, I think. You know what I
yeah,
mean? And I like that because we've turned this business culture into such a siloed thing, and it's about this mask you put on and this like
yeah,
a perfect pitch and like having all the button down answers, but we
right,
lack authenticity with that. And what I think we need to return more towards is vulnerability, and that's
yeah.
one of
I think
the
so.
a key aspect, by the way, I think of effective storytelling and effective entrepreneurship is how vulnerable can you be too?
Right.
Like what wins trust to me as a VC is when founders know when to say, I don't know the answer, as opposed to just bullshit or try to have a perfect,
Exactly. Exactly. It's you just have to be real, and just because people that are sniffing out the bullshit a lot more these days. And I think just with the storytelling and authenticity, I mean, I can tell when I get pitched for articles and
yeah,
stories and whatever. I
yeah,
can smell the people who are like, I am a deep and interesting person.
right,
Really? Yeah. No, you're not.
right. That's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. I don't know. Barack, do you want to bring in some questions? I know there's some questions floating around out there. Um, oh, wait, no, Tim, come back. Wait, no.
Yeah,
We're not done
I'm
yet.
here. Okay.
I want you to tell me the story about the Zoom economy, that piece you wrote on Medium.
Yeah.
I, I found it fascinating. Like, tell me what your thinking is with this.
Okay, so we've all had to adapt to do work over Zoom, right?
Mhm.
Every single job has now had to figure out how to deliver the service over Zoom. You know, fitness instructors, yoga coaches,
Yeah, yeah,
recruiters, everybody has to redefine and figure out how can I do my job over digital. This affected me because I had some friends in my extended tribe of connections that actually had passed from COVID, and we had to figure out how to do digital funerals on the fly. I ended up co-hosting one, and none of us knew what to do. 108 people in a Zoom room staring at each other, weeping, and that's when it hit me. Is like, oh my God, we need to reinvent all of our rituals, all of our practices,
yeah,
because we're forced to do this now. And that it suddenly made me realize, wow, this is going to be a new format that probably stick around, and this will require new talent sets. Like we were there, and we didn't know who should speak, who should moderate.
right.
So there was even this call for like, God, I wish there was a chaplain who could just pop in and moderate our digital funeral. But that was an example of something happening in real time.
Yeah,
I ended up joining a nonprofit that helps with helping people with processing end of life, and we just published a guide to hosting virtual memorials. But that was an example of every type of job, every type of social pattern and ritual we have needing to be figured out on Zoom. And like I said, necessity is the mother of invention. These things are getting into sort of innovated on in real time, but new formats are coming out, and this is where the new part comes out. Um, a lot of friends are doing Zoom happy hours, but now that's calling for events. People are playing, I call them ZJs, Zoom jockeys.
yeah.
They're telling
You
people what
wrote
to do.
about it.
For the next 30 minutes, we're going to do a scavenger hunt. Okay, for the 30 minutes after that, we're going to do a game show. So now you're going to see like the Zynga of Zoom that's producing little games within Zoom, right? You'll see all sorts of new innovations here. Zoom is not the only player, of course. There were many big platforms, Google, Tube, they're going to come after this as well. But Zoom is shorthand for this type of real time conversational interactive internet that we're seeing birthed. And so we're going to reinvent everything from dance parties to happy hour. What if there's a new
Graduations,
right
religion, politics.
religion, church?
Yeah.
I've learned how to be a homeschool teacher now because I have to,
Right.
right? So everything is kind of getting reinvented, and this is leading to innovation. Some of these will be new formats that are so compelling, we'll want to use it even after you can go back to in person. You know,
Right. Yeah, I
like
agree.
yeah.
I mean, it's just there's something. First of all, we didn't have to get on airplanes. I didn't have to go to California. You didn't have to come to
Mhm.
Colorado to do this. And I feel really comfortable. I'm wearing a baseball hat because I have pandemic hair. But you know what? We're just a couple dudes sitting around having a conversation, and it feels really like culturally like it's a pivot for us, and it's good. I think it's really good. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. And back to that integration of work and life, I do a lot of work calls just taking a walk in my neighborhood now, and that's acceptable. So imagine you're doing, even a board call, but you're out taking a stroll, or you're
Right.
riding bikes with your kids or something. That there's something kind of special about that,
It's cool. Like I think it's a good reset mentally for all of us, especially Americans. We're so office bound. Like we feel like we have to be in the office to, just I don't know why. But that is never coming back, I think. So anyway, thank you for that. And
Mhm.
also, if people want to read that article, it's on Medium.
I think so. Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. So it's Chang Medium on the
Yep.
Zoom economy. It's fantastic. Everybody should read it.
Yeah. Thank
But have
you.
a dictionary nearby because there's a lot of big words. So
Thank you, Amy.
you're welcome.
So there are some questions from the audience.
Hmm.
How are you sourcing during these times? Moreover, given Mayfield operates in both early stage and growth, have you
Hmm.
seen an effect on completed deals, either negativity or positivity?
Okay, so on the second part, effect on completed deals, we've seen some crazy behavior. When times are stressful, that's when people's true nature comes out. And we've had deals where there were signed term sheets, definitive legal documents, and the new investor backed out and said, oh, COVID happened, now everything's changed. Even though I signed legal documents, I want to change the deal. So that's a no-no. That, usually you really see people's character when things are at their worst. And so, you can imagine this firm will probably be a firm that none of the people we'll ever work with again because they, did not want to honor that contract. And meanwhile, there's been other firms and companies we've seen where they did honor that. They said, you know what, the world has gone to hell. We don't know what's going to happen, but we made a handshake deal. We're going to honor that. So character really comes out in these tough times, right? And also, there's a lot of greed and fear. So there's been a lot of people with sharp elbows and a lot of investors who have negotiated much more ruthlessly, saying like, now it's flipped. It's a buyer's market now. In terms of that's related to sourcing too, because we've never been hit with more fundraising pitches than ever. In crisis times, every company is worried about getting money. So it's as if the entire market is fundraising. Those that don't have 2 years worth of cash, everybody is like, I got to get cash. If this is a nuclear winter or another Great Depression, I need cash for the next 2 or 3 years. So literally, it's almost as if every company wants to or needs to raise money now.
And what recommendations should you give to startups to survive in these special times, especially upcoming years?
If you're already an existing company, try to really tighten your belt. We don't know how long this will last. There'll probably be re-outbreaks of COVID. It'll probably mutate. Moreover, we'll probably have climate collapse effects kicking in, more social unrest, all sorts of things. Expect the environment to be kind of tough. Therefore, if you can, it's not about grow at any scale right now. If anything, 2020, the market will probably give you a break and not punish you for not having growth. Instead, if you can cut your burn rate, get more lean on your expenses, and just stay afloat and not have to raise a ton of money, that gives you a lot more position. Many of our companies decide to cut all marketing and just turn profitable, because that way they can just sustain, grow organically. Right now in this market, profitability is king. So if you have that ability, instead of going for super 3x growth each year, see if you can even get close to cash flow break even without having to raise a ton of money. If you're a new startup, look at these new spaces, try to solve problems that really address humanity. We've got climate, we've got, disinformation, we've got everything from food security, biosecurity, we have ways of trying to fix what the nature of work is. Those are rich opportunities to provide solutions. This could, back to the Zoom economy, how can you enable people to do their jobs or create new forms of work over these digital formats? There's going to easily be 100 startups born in that area too.
Before the meeting, you also mentioned, while I was asking a quick question, will Mayfield Fund is going to still invest in startups in next months or this year? And how are you going to meet with the startups? Because it was physically meetings earlier. And what are you going to do that?
We are trying to invest. We are taking meetings. They're all virtual right now. It's different. It's not the same when you're in person. Our firm principle is usually every member of the investment team has to meet the founding team in person at least once. But we can't do that now. And we did close a deal where that, only half the team had met the team in person. We're trying to figure out what can be done. And we're probably going to figure out how to do a deal without meeting the team in person. But that might require a lot of time over Zoom or taking walks on FaceTime calls or something. Because the reason for that is you're trying to get to know people. It's back to the armchair psychology comment. You're really trying to understand self-awareness, vulnerability, coachability, blind spots. These are human traits. They're not even technical due diligence. Those parts are hard to replace without spending time with people. Maybe that means we spend, 10 hours with the Zoom calls with the person as opposed to 5 hours in person. But we're going to have to figure that out. And the goal is that, yes, we will do new investments still. It's unclear when California will open back up. We're thinking later this summer that people can do meetings again, but it's still unclear right now.
Before the COVID, this pandemic, how were you sourcing the deals? Is it recommendation, warm email, cold emails, conferences?
So we tend to source both from inbound, from referrals from our network especially, as well as outbound. And the outbound is we try to develop an investment thesis, a certain theme, and then we try to find the startups and the people in those themes. Or if there's a theme people aren't working on, but we believe in it a lot, we sometimes will assemble teams to go work on it. So that's kind of like this notion of acceleration or incubation. In general, I think most of our deals have been warm referrals from our network. So one of the best sources of deals is we've backed probably 400 plus companies over the 50 years, right? That's a huge network of people. And sometimes the best founders are either repeat CEO, or if there's a successful exit, that CEO is probably retiring or becoming an angel or something, but the vice president is ready to be a CEO. So it's that graduation of each level. A director is ready to be a VP or a founder. VP is ready to be, CXO. So it's just mining that network of these people as they grow and graduate and create new companies. Like every hit new company is probably births at least a dozen other startup companies afterwards.
What are your red flags in the startup meetings?
The biggest one, like I said, is when people try to have too many perfect answers. But back to self-awareness and vulnerability. If every question is, oh, I know the perfect answer, but it doesn't smell authentic, that leads to trust issues. A better answer is, I don't know. And then the even better answer is, I don't know yet, and here's how I will run some tests to try to figure that out, right? So self-awareness is a really big one. It's a tricky one because you have to be a good storyteller, but you also have to be curious and open-minded. And so, we want a founder that believes, has his or her conviction, which is strong, but is also open-minded to listen to what the market is saying or other new ideas come back. And that's tricky because you don't want somebody who's too wishy-washy. And if I give an idea and they completely change their minds and just follow my suggestion, that's not good. But if I try to give an idea and they always dismiss it and say, nope, no, not, I know I know exactly the answer, that's not good either. So it's an interesting balance. My favorite profile is a scientific mindset, which means I don't know, but I have a hypothesis. Here's how I will test it, and then I will adjust my hypothesis based on the data. That requires a lot of curiosity.
What are the terms of investor terms, jargon, how to say no to entrepreneurs, founders after the meeting? Because, for example, let's keep in touch. Is it definitely no?
Yeah, this is one problem with venture capitalists overall, and sometimes we're guilty of doing this as well. For investors, a lot of the times it's not clear should we invest or not. The biggest question is, should I invest now versus wait for more proof? Because there's risk on the table, and usually time provides more data. And what often forces investors to move is if the deal is hot, we're going away. Otherwise, the default answer will be, yeah, I'll hang around and see how you develop, right? That's why investors tend to not give a hard no and say, well, let's keep in touch because there's not enough data now, but it could be interesting. They're trying to keep options open, but that doesn't help the entrepreneur. In general, if you're a founder and you're pitching, your goal is get to the next meeting, just like in sales. And if the investor reaches out to set up the next meeting, that's a really good sign. That's genuine interest. If they don't respond and you have to keep bugging them, it's like, hey, what do you think? Can we have a next meeting? That's possibly a sign that, they're lukewarm on it. And so that's a lot of times what makes investors move is when there's a lot of competition, or the team is doing well, and there's going to be a lot of investor offers, and people can sense that. It's a really strange dynamic. It's like 20% of the deals get 80% of the attention. So it's investors are often fighting over the same, several dozen deals.
And what do you recommend? There are couple of questions more. How should the entrepreneurs send the first email and follow up that email?
The very best first email is if you can get a warm introduction from a mutual friend. The highest recommendation is from another founder in their portfolio, or their alumni, or a mutual friend that they respect. That's almost the highest form of filtering. It's really like social proof. And all our best deals usually came in referral from somebody who is trusted. So if you can get a trusted mutual friend to introduce you, I don't think we've ever funded a cold introduction before. So somebody who just emails you out of the blue and says, "Hi, I've got a pitch for you." I don't think we've ever accepted that. It's usually been through a trusted channel. Try to find a trusted channel, and if you're a founder, try to build an advisory board or maybe an independent director who is respected in the field, because they will help you open doors and make the intros. Then for the follow-up email, it's, thank you for your time. You asked these 3 questions. Here are our thoughts on those. You looked for this information. Here are those. our process, ideally, it's like our process is moving along. We have 3 other firms that are, continuing discussions. Let me know if you'd like to engage, right? So that it shows paying attention to the detail. Does that make sense?
And the last question is my question. Hero's Journey is Joseph
Yes.
Campbell's. I'm also fan of Joseph Campbell's Hero's Journey. And what motivates you to wake up in the morning, depending on the hero's journey? And where exactly are you in this journey?
So, what I realized about the hero's journey, for those of you who haven't heard it, it's basically there's a pattern to every story. There's like, 10 or 12 steps, and it's usually that's the reluctant hero goes into a new land, makes friends and enemies and mentors, hones his or her craft, comes up with a grand challenge. That grand challenge can be external, like an enemy, or often internal challenge. They face this grand battle, and then are transformed through what happens, and then they return home. What I keep finding is life is a cycle of multiple hero's journeys. You do one hero's journey, then you go to the next level and do level 2 of that, level 3 of that. And so you could say each startup is a hero's journey. So you might do multiple startups. You might have multiple hero's journeys, right? For me as a VC, I'm probably in my 3rd or 4th journey now. The first journey was, can I do a deal? The second was, can I get any deal to be successful? And the third one is, can I, mentor others and build a bigger practice? And now it's, can I have impact on the world in a positive way? And so my hero's journey right now is, how do I use this for-profit model of venture capital to serve the world, specifically for the big problems that we face, whether that's environmental sustainability goals or United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So it's really, how can business be used as a force of good? How can we do that through new thinking on business models, or even like corporate structures like B Corps and others, to be more regenerative and more beneficial to society overall?
I have
Amy
a question.
and team.
Can I ask
just
one really quickly? You have to walk us through this fantastic art collection hanging behind you.
Oh, yeah. There's some visionary artists. The one on this side is Amanda Sage, and that's actually, she did a portrait of my girlfriend. We're here in Oakland in her house, so that's her in regal form from a psychedelic fashion show she did.
Wow.
The second piece is also an impressionistic piece of visionary art, celebrating sort of Mother Nature and mushrooms and in all their form, and the other pieces. A more traditional Asian piece that is an old Chinese scroll, facsimile of that. So yeah, I'm a big fan of art these days, and my personal passion now is collecting technology integrated art. So things that have 3D laser cutting, or projected augmented reality, or color changing LEDs controllable by mobile phones. So there's a lot happening in the art world too.
Yeah. No, creativity is a huge part of a driver for entrepreneurship. But those paintings they are completely unrelated, but they look so good together. I'm an art collector, but they look fantastic.
Yeah.
2 thumbs up.
Amy and team. Thank you very much for this valuable interview.
Thank you.
And stay safe and healthy.
Thank you, Rock. Thank you to Startup Turkey. You guys rock.
Yeah, thank you for all the entrepreneurs. Yes, thank you. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.